record. Okay, it's recording. So welcome everyone. We're going to be doing a quick review of day one of our Learn.js series. So first of all, what is JavaScript? It's a programming language which allows you to implement complex features on websites. So it's used to add functionality to websites. And a fun fact is it was created by Brendan Eich in 1995 in only 10 days. I think Atticus put in that last part. So the thing is, since it was only created in 10 days, there are going to be some weird quirks in JavaScript. But then because it became so popular, they couldn't just take out those quirks, or then all of the existing applications built on JavaScript would just fail. So you're going to see some weird stuff in JavaScript, like why the equals operator is you have to put 3 equals signs. Instead of most programming languages, you have 2. Actually, we'll get into that. So then JavaScript is one of the 3 websites. It's one of the 3 programming languages which are used to create websites. So first of all, HTML is used to create a website structure. CSS is used to control how each structure looks, its styling. And then finally, JavaScript is used to add functionality to a site. That could be if a button is clicked, show a pop-up. It can be all sorts of things, like you can create games with the front end with HTML and CSS functionality through JavaScript. So we're going to get into that later. And then just fundamentally, programming is creating a set of instructions for the computer to execute. And the important thing to know for synchronous programming is that these instructions are executed chronologically. So if we want this JavaScript logo to draw a box, it's going to draw up, left, down, and right. But the important thing is it does all of those instructions in order instead of just trying to do all of them at the same time. We will actually look at programming which doesn't necessarily, where you write code that doesn't necessarily run in order, that's asynchronous programming. So yeah, I think that's in our day 5 slides. So let's go into the JavaScript basics. So to output something to the console, you can use console.log. So can everybody try this out? We'll go to our REPL. Try doing console.log, and then you can output anything. So like I can do hello world, and we'll see it shows up in our console here. And then note for now, the hello world here is a string, which is denoted by the quotations, and strings just symbolize text. If we didn't use this, then it would think that we're trying to use a variable that hasn't been initialized yet, and then all sorts of errors. So for now, let's put what we want to write in quotations to use strings. So let's go on to the structure of JavaScript. It uses curly braces. Python uses indentation. So that's what we're going to see when we start using blocks of code and if statements, functions, loops. And note that JavaScript, you would traditionally put semicolons, but it does have automatic semicolon insertion. So we don't have to, we're not going to show you in these examples. So let's try variables. So JavaScript is interesting because there are 2 main ways to declare variables. So the let keyword is used when you want to declare a variable whose value can change, and const is used for a variable whose value will not change. And if you try to change that variable's value, then you're going to get a type error assignment to constant variable. So can everybody try this? Can you make a variable with let, and then one with const, and then what you can do is you can output those variables to the console by doing console.log and the variable name. And note, you don't have to put quotations around it because that would just output the string. To use variables, we just refer to their name. So here's an example. So we can do let number equals 5, and then we can do console.log number. So we're accessing this variable with its name. And then we can also do some math. So like number plus 1. We could store a string here as well. Okay, so everybody try that out. Then naming conventions. The main thing actually, so it's okay. So basically all of your variable names must start with a letter or an acceptable character. So like it says with the letter, but also if you try it, an underscore will work at the beginning, a $sign will work at the beginning, but then I think all other characters do not work. So I see something chat. Okay, cool. You know, our website is up, so now we can use that for our practice problems. So nice job, Jerry. So let's try making the variables. Just note that you can't start a variable name with a number because then JavaScript would get confused. Like it would just think like the first part. So for 2 apples, 2 is a number, and then apples is a variable. So it would think that you're trying to declare 2 things, not just one name. So then that wouldn't work. So yeah, just keep in mind you typically will just use just letters and underscores for your variable names. Just know that you can't start it with a number. So let's go on to data structures. JavaScript has one type of number, which can store both integers and decimals. So if you have some Python experience, you'll know that there's a data type for integers, and then there's one for numbers with decimals called floats. So JavaScript number includes both of them. And note that JavaScript has many floating point precision errors with decimals due to how it stores numbers. So why don't you try this by yourself? If you do console.log 0.1 plus 0.2, you may be surprised by what the result is. It's not exactly 0.3. There's a little bit of an error. So let's all try some operators right now. So just look at the screen. I'll keep it up here. And then just try like console.log 6 plus 7, 5 raised to the 3rd power, and then just see what gets outputted. Okay, so let's try a little activity in the chat. So Jerry, can you kind of like write a sentence which is like 5 plus, but like you use the words 4 minus 7, and then I'd like you guys to kind of translate that sentence into JavaScript code. And then note, so like you would write like 5 and then like the word plus,
Okay.
4, like raised to the 7th power, mod something, yeah. So just when Jerry posts his practice problem, just give it a stab in the chat. And then in the meantime, I'll show you guys how to use some of the more complicated operators so we can get rid of this. Actually, this is, if you want to comment something, which is just something that won't be run as code, you can put 2 slashes. And then for a multi-line comment, like we have some stuff here, then you can start it with slash asterisk and then end it with asterisk slash. So here, so let us to use exponents. We can do a number, 2 asterisks, and then that'll work. To use modulus, which is when you divide something, get the remainder. Then you would use the % sign. So that would look like this. 5 mod 2 is 1, because when you divide 5 by 2, you get a remainder of 1. And then finally, this may be important for variables. So we'll use let because we want to change the value. Number equals 3. We can increment the value of our variable like this, so plus plus. And then when we log this, we'll see that number is now equal to 4. That's something that you can use as well. Okay, so I'm going to move on, but why don't you guys just think about this problem here? And then when you have a solution, then just post it to us in the chat. Let's look at strings. So strings are collections of characters in JavaScript. So they represent text. And then, so you can use double or single quotations. And then you can also convert strings into numbers, and vice versa. You can convert numbers into strings. So we'll take a look. We're not going to look at that specifically now, but we'll take a look at that later. But just know that you can convert between types. Thanks for joining today, Brandon. We're in the middle of our slides. Did you, were you here for our last meeting?
Yeah.
Okay, then that's good. We're just reviewing the stuff from last time. So you're just in time
Okay.
for the new content, yeah. So yeah, in the meantime, you can just pull up REPL and then you can follow along with what we're doing.
Okay.
Okay, sounds good. So strings, I'm gonna put some string operations here. So why don't you make a variable that's a string and just try to use some of these operations. And then, so basically like how this could look like is if you make a variable called string and set it equal to a string, then if you just put like console.log string, the name of your variable, dot length, then you'll get the length of the string. So try out some of these and then we'll take a closer look at a couple of them. So yeah, while you're doing that, I'll just also show an example here. I'm just gonna delete this stuff. So you could do let string equals, this is my string. So the first thing we can try is the length of the string. So we could do string.length. And then if you run this, you'll notice that, and let me move this, its length is 17. So how do we get this? It's just 17 characters, including spaces, so spaces count as well. And then the next thing we should talk about is the concept of indexing. So you can access any character from a string because each of them are associated with an index. So for example, if I do console.log string brackets and then the number of the index 0, then it's going to give me uppercase T because that is the character at the first position, which is 0. Okay, the second position is 1. So I'm just going to refer to this now as the 0th index, the first index. And yeah, so just to stay consistent. But try that out. Try logging different indexes. And then we'll go into the special functions in more detail later. But you can just try a couple of them out by yourself, like to uppercase brings everything to lowercase to uppercase. If you change this word to lowercase. So now arrays. Jerry, do you want to explain arrays?
Arrays,
and then you can do objects as well, yeah.
So arrays are pretty much like strings. They're not too complicated. So like we covered last time, they're also 0 index, meaning they start at 0. And unlike strings, they can hold anything, not only characters. They could hold other strings, they could hold numbers, and they can even hold other arrays. So this example here, we have an array with word 67, 234.567. So this is 3 elements, but the indexes are 0, 1, and 2. And if you log those indexes, you will get the elements at the index of the array. Yeah, so arrays are basically Python lists. Except you can assign elements that are larger than the length of the array. You don't typically do this, but I guess you can if you want. And what that does is it just creates 2 empty elements, or however many empty elements, and then puts that element at the new index.
Okay, let's all quickly
try
and
make an example.
Yeah, let's all make an array. So make a variable called array. So you can do like const array. And it can, and just put some values in here, like hello. You can put a number, then you can try logging the whole array. You can try logging specific indexes. Then can someone try this out and put it in the chat? What happens when you try to log an index that doesn't exist? So like 2, we know the highest index is only 1. What would happen? Okay, so yeah, if you guys figure it out, we will go over this, but if anyone wants to try it and put in the chat, that would be appreciated. So let's actually, Jerry, why don't you detail some array operations?
Okay, so arrays like strings also have special functions. These are push, which inserts at the end, splice, which inserts at an index, or you could use it to delete. You don't have to worry too much about that. Pop, which removes the last, and shift, which removes the first. Those are just functions that you could use if you want to.
Yeah, so so you've made an array, right? So if you want to add an element to the end, you can use push as so. So we're going to add the Boolean true, which is, it's another data type. It's just either true or false, and it'll be used for conditional logic. So if we push this, and then we can log our array, we can see now this is not really loading. Okay. So why don't you guys try this by yourself? And then you should be able to see now there is a third element in this array, which has a value of true. And then similarly try out all of the other array operations.
Okay, well, objects are dictionaries. Like Python, we have dictionaries with key value pairs, and JavaScript, we have objects with key value pairs. And I prefer JavaScript objects to Python dictionaries because they're a lot more flexible. They can store like a lot more things. Here we have an object with keys. Oh, the key always has to be a string or a number, but typically we use like a string. And then the value can be anything, literally anything. So here we have high as one of the values. We have 5, we have an array, and values can even be like other objects and other functions, which make them better than dictionaries. So to access a property, we can use the dot operator. So object.hello would print the value at hello, which would be high. Or we could use the brackets, similar to how we did in Python. That does the same thing. And you can also access values in objects, just how you would access them into variables. So you could print object.array3, which would print the element at index 3 of the array inside of the object.
Yeah, so now let's make a variable, so const object, and then we put curly braces, and then we put the name of our key. So I can make a key called key, and you can give it any value. So like we could do like, this is just a, and it has a value of 0. So we can always log this. I'm gonna refresh REFL. So log this, then try logging individual. If you put the name of like the object.key, then it basically just, it accesses the value of that key. So that will be outputted. Then if you think about it, so we have arrays, we have arrays. And then if you think about them, they're basically like objects, but they only have numbers as keys. So that's why actually we're gonna look at this, a specific keyword called typeof, which you can use to figure out a data structure's type. So you'll see that arrays will actually be classified as objects, as like specific objects in JavaScript. Yeah, so try this out. I think, would you guys like to stop today, or do you want to cover conditional logic? I think we're okay either way. Like this is good. So we did a review of last time. We can do conditional logic next time, or we could briefly cover it now. So what do you guys all say? I think let's do this. Okay, let's stop for today, just so you have enough time to get to your next class. I recommend, you can always check out, so you can check out these slides by yourself, and then something else to look out for is after you do your slides, you can check out all of these practice problems here. So just once again, go to our website, resources, JavaScript practice. You can check these all out. We're going to be adding more, like they're going to be more before next club meeting. So even between club meetings, you can try out these practice problems. A lot of this stuff does require functions and conditional logic. So to know that you can always access these slides and get ahead by yourself. So just once again, to see all of the slides, go to our Learn JavaScript resource, and then you will see all of these slides here. So right now, what you should learn, like if you want to review stuff we did today or just make sure that you're up to speed, then if you know lesson 1, then you're good. If you want to get a head start for next meetings, like content, then just finish day 1 for conditional logic and then finish loops here. So let me stop the recording.